Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. Sorry to get started a little bit late. Welcome to our first presentation with our first artist in residence of 2024, Lisa Kamahamak Lynch. Before I give her introduction, I'd like to just do a land acknowledgement. This is the Friends of Sheldon Jackson Museum's land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge and express our appreciation to the indigenous people of Tlingit who have occupied this land for longer than any of us can imagine. And after 250 years of colonization in Alaska, are graciously allowing us to share this amazing land with them. Thank you. Lisa arrived on the 10th, and she has already started to teach a beading class, is giving her first presentation today. And she'll be here until July 2nd. So if you have an opportunity to visit with her in the museum or online virtually, please do. Lisa is an enrolled member of the Nome Eskimo community from Anchorage, Alaska. Her parents are Cheryl and Tim Lynch of Nome, Alaska and Buffalo, New York. Her maternal grandparents are the late Lawrence and Mary Ann Davis of Deering and Teller, Alaska. And her paternal grandparents are the late Robert and Ellen Lynch of Buffalo, New York. She was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, and spent her summers in Nome with her extended family learning about her culture and traditions. She also spent time in the summer visiting her families in upstate New York and traveling the East Coast of America. She studied art history and classical studies in Rome for 4 years, where she learned to appreciate art and the depth of emotion it carries. After that, she studied to become an EMT here in Alaska, and currently she's a pre-med student at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. We're very pleased to have this talented beater, skin sewer, and ivory scrimshaw worker here with us. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being here. And I'll turn it over to you for your presentation, Beadwork as a Luxury Good.
Jacqueline introduced, my name's Lisa. So today's presentation is about beadwork as a luxury good, or seeing beadwork as a prestige good, which it's normally not perceived as such. So we'll go over just the very beginning. What is beadwork? So this definition was taken directly from the We Are Native article, which is a great website for learning about other tribes in America and also learning whose land you're on. So the definition they give is beadwork can be daily work in forms such as hair clips, medallions, watches, bracelets, necklaces, and any other imaginable jewelry form. But it's most glorious when seen on a Native American dancer representing his or her tribe, history, elders, and ancestors. Beading a full set of regalia for a dancer can take up to a year, depending on the size of the beads and the intricacy of the design. That's why regalia is difficult to purchase, is it takes time and love that people often don't prefer to make for those who aren't family members or close friends. It's simply impossible to put a price on a year's worth of work where countless hours are invested. Yet it's worth more than the sacrifice to see a beloved family member shine in the power circle as they wear your designs. And it's from their article on just beadwork and what is it, where they answer common questions, which is also what I'm doing in the slideshow. So here are some examples of my work. So to give you an introduction to why I'm really interested in beadwork. So the bottom necklace, the blue one, is a glass bead and ivory pearl necklace that, much like in the example that I read for the definition of beadwork, I normally don't sell these large necklaces because the price is too much, I would say, for an individual unless they commission a piece. So instead, I donate these pieces to causes that are important to me. So the blue one actually was donated to the Ted Stevens Foundation for the first Alaskans Smokehouse Gala, and that was the highest bid item in the silent auction, which I was very proud of. And then the red one, which is, you can see a progress photo of it. So it's made with pearls and glass beads, and they're in a variety of shades of red. I actually made that one for my mom to wear because we were both invited to the first annual Red Dress Gala to help with funding for missing and murdered Indigenous people, women, children, and two spirits. And I was there as an artist because I donated another large red necklace for them to auction off so they could have funds for family members who need help with like getting an investigator, they need like air miles or things like that. So for me, I understand the amount of time and effort it takes to put into a luxury good. And so I will start again with beadwork and where it comes from. So as a lot of people may or may not know, beadwork and the use of the glass beads is not typically indigenous to the Americas, both North, South, and Central America. It is more of a modern take on regalia, and by modern I mean from the 1700s or so is when it really became formalized and became more of a craft pursuit. Before that, it was more experimental and learning how to integrate it with our traditions. And then in the 1700s, in the early 1700s to mid 1700s, it really got solidified as a more traditional craft and integrated into regalia. So we have some of the origins of beadwork in the Americas would actually be with the Tonto people. So these people occupy what is now known as the Dominican Republic. And they are one of the first tribes to have contact with explorers and Europeans, and they were known for using shells and clay beads and small stones. But an even older art form of that is actually using bird bones and actual seeds. So when you go to a craft store, you'll see that they're called seed beads. And it's because for the longest time in human history, the beads were actually seeds of flowers that were just painted or dyed different colors as jewelry, because we just didn't have the technology yet to make beads. Another example of that can be found as early as the reign of King Tut over in Egypt. So he was buried with many beautiful necklaces and collars and everything. And one of the ones I have on the screen is the seed bead one. So that one is actual seeds. So it's a combination of flower seeds and small bird bones and small animal bones dyed to look like jewelry. And as time went on, the seeds actually bloomed into flowers because they was preserved in a humid and damp environment. And when it's placed on top of the mummy, it kind of composting. So it's actually the bloomed and then dried collar is what we see preserved. So now that we know there is an example for a lot of beadwork in Central and Southern America, South America, there isn't as much of what we see nowadays in Alaska, and we'll go on with that. The next example is instead of using the seed beads, a lot of people traditionally in Alaska used ivory, quill, or small stones, or even bones to decorate their regalia, decorate their clothing, or to wear as earrings simply. Common earrings were little stones and little ivory carved into the bead shape and used for earrings. I've seen a lot. And then with contact with the Russians starting in the 1600s to the early 1700s, we started seeing an influx of what is traditionally called trade beads. So in Alaska, the most common trade bead you'll see is those blue ones. So they're royal blue because the Russians would use those often and use them in their own regalia. So those were the ones they always had on hand. They had the blue ones. They also had red ones and white ones. So in Alaska, you'll see mainly those three colors for trade beads, whereas in the lower 48, you might see a bigger variety because they had more access to like merchants, the mainland Europe and everything, and all the traders and the Yankee whalers coming back and forth. But for Alaska, our introduction to beadwork was more directly from the Russians. So, and it also just happened to be Russians who finally got all the way to the very far east part of Russia, made it over by ship, made it to Alaska, and then finally made contact with the tribe. So trade beads are really scarce because you don't want to carry those the whole way if you're here to go trapping. And this map is actually a very interesting read. So the University of Alaska Fairbanks 3 years ago published a paper about how they found pre-contact Venetian glass beads at an archaeological site just inland of Kotzebue, and they were mapping out possible routes that it took to get here because we established contact with the Russians in the late 1600s, as I mentioned earlier, but these Venetian glass beads date back to the 12th century, so they were proposing that there must have been a lot more open dialogue and communication between Northwest Alaska and the far east of Russia. Yeah, so that's where a lot of early Alaskan inspiration comes from. So now it comes down to what is the beadwork and what is like the items I sell. So is it a traditional item? Is it a cultural object? Is it for trading? Is it regalia? So here is the definition of regalia: the royal rights or prerogatives, the emblems, symbols, or paraphernalia indicative of royalty, a special dress or decorations or an insignia indicative of an office or membership. So a lot of people you'll hear say they have their regalia on, and that just means they're formal clothes that have cultural meaning. So for me today, I have my regalia on. I have a cusbuck on that my mom made for me, and then I have a hairpin that I like to wear that's beaded, as well as a large beaded necklace that I made myself. So for me, that's what regalia is. And then next to it is I took a screenshot of some Google images. When you type in Native American, Alaska Native beadwork, here are the Google searches that come up about common questions people have. And that's going to be about what this slideshow is and how buying from these tribes, buying from indigenous craftsmen and artisans actually is a better deal in the end for you than it would be from buying like them a large fashion brand or a fast fashion brand too. So some of the questions we have is, can I wear indigenous beadwork? Yes. If the artist is selling it at a market, at a powwow, at a convention, at a fair, they want you to buy it because they want to share with you their talent. Because again, this all started because the Russians, when they came over, they wanted to bring stuff back to their families. So they would give the beads to some people, to craftspeople here in Alaska, and they would make them little jewelry pieces, little earrings for them to take back to their family. So they could show they got something from Alaska for them. And so we'll go over some types of beadwork, just we have here in Alaska, just an overview of some different groups. So the large photo with a lot of different examples in that, that's the Athabascan style, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of Alaskan beadwork. So that's definitely the most widespread and most popular style of beadwork here. It's very easy to not be able to tell them apart because we don't have any strict cultural definitions, unlike some other cultures where even in Norway, where you have the different silver designs for your different families, your clans, and where you're from. Like if you're from Oslo, you wouldn't wear the same silver pin as somebody from the far northern part. But for us, it's just the beadwork style. There's only so many different ways you can make a flower, but the most popular you'll see popular motifs. So in the Athabascan style, you'll see a lot of flowers. You'll see even butterflies. And the biggest thing is they always use moose hide. So they tack all their beads down to moose leather because that's a large, that's an item they have a lot of in their quantity. Next to it is this example of things I'm more familiar with. It's the Inupiaq style. So that's like the little flower that you would see on slippers or on hairpins or on a brooch, a pin, and it's more, a lot of the time it's smaller and you could tack it onto anything. A lot of people prefer to put it on sealskin because a lot of the time we're only really wearing that kind of beadwork on our slippers or our indoor shoes. And some people now do also wear them as big earrings. So a lot of people will actually tack it down to the moose leather. So it's the all natural materials and they'll wear them as the big earrings. Another example from here in Southeast is the octopus bag that the Tlingit people make, and they are decorated with different designs like the kelp. And then if for the different tribes, you could decorate them with your clan and the form line artwork, as well as there's button bags too. I didn't picture them. Next to them is one of the pieces I enjoy looking at the most is the Alutiiq headdresses. So they went all out when they got introduced to beadwork. So these are beaded headdresses and they're made with the delicate sized beads, and it takes quite a few months for someone to make them. It covers your entire head like a cap. And then if you have really long hair, I've also seen women at AFN where the back of the beadwork extends all the way down to cover the rest of their hair. So all these ladies who have like waist length or longer hair, the beadwork goes all the way down too. And I've seen one as heavy as 25 pounds because it's been made with such precious material, because a lot of people will intermingle the ivory, the deliria shell, different teeth, like bones of animals and teeth from like beavers, and in the 40 a lot of deer teeth is what you'll see. But for the Alutiiq people, definitely a lot of ivory usage, as well as the large beads. And then the next slide is another common example of what you see a lot is the Yupik headdresses for dancing that the women wear while dancing. So there's beadwork that goes across the forehead and then down to cover the ears, almost like you're wearing earrings without wearing earrings. And so that's what Yupik people are known for using with their beadwork. And it's a very unique to their culture. Nobody else wears the headdresses and nobody else does the beadwork like that. It's almost the similar design like the beginning of the Alutiiq headdress we saw on the slide before, but it's not a whole headpiece. It's just the headband part. And then on the other side is a pair of slippers with the Inupiaq style slipper top beadwork, which I mentioned earlier. So if you're not doing the full flower, you'll do the 6-pointed star a lot. And these can get very complicated and very large because people will make them very ornate. So you'll have the star, you'll have another layer of beads as decoration, then you'll round it out, and then you'll add a border and you'll add trim to that. So and all of it just to go on the toe of a slipper. And so that's how you could be able to charge more for it. And there's people do whatever colors they like, and it's most common color you'll see is a lot of blue. So even here at my workstation, you'll see a majority of my beads are blue because I get a lot of people who ask if I sell things in blue because everybody wears blue. And so yeah, so you'll see a lot of blue, some purples. My mom actually got me a custom pair of yellow ones. So I have ones with big yellow flowers, and every time I wear them, because I would wear them to like workplaces, or if I'm going to be inside at something, I'll wear those instead of shoes. And a lot of people have said they've never seen yellow Inupiaq beadwork before. And I was like, yep, because it's custom. No. And then, so this is a really good book that I do recommend for anybody interested in more about beadwork and how it's actually what started out of necessity. Because with the contact with the Russians and then later contact with more Americans and being an American territory, we now had to start, paying taxes, like pay for a house. The nomadic style of living and the subsistence lifestyle was no longer feasible. So one of the ways that people would make money, especially women who were, if they didn't really speak English or they didn't have a formal education, is they would turn to beadwork and sewing. So it's called Painful Beauty, and it's by Megan A. Schmetzer, and it's a book about how the Tlingit women really stepped up to provide for their families through beadwork and selling regalia as tourist goods, especially through the Inside Passage with gold miners. And this story is often echoed all over the state of Alaska. My Aka, my great-grandmother, made her living and provided for her family by being a seamstress and also and by beading. And so a lot of the time, even though it is traditional wear for us, it also goes, you can't have it be traditional wear without acknowledging that it's also a means of survival for financial security for families. And there's like beaders who do the powwow circuits in the lower 48 who make in the 21st century, they make their whole living off of beadwork still, which is a very beautiful thing to see that they could still be a full-time artist and be able to provide for their family. So yeah, this book talks about like it is a beautiful skill and it's beautiful to wear on regalia, but you also make it to survive. So now it comes to the discussion about what the name of the presentation is, beadwork as a luxury item. One of the most common questions I get is when people ask me the price of the necklaces I sell, I tell them, oh, I don't actually sell them. This one's for display. And then people ask me, no, how much are they? They can't be that much. So the one I'm wearing right now is a medium one, and it's $300. And the moment you tell somebody at a craft fair something's $300, they have to leave. They cannot stand that. And the ivory necklaces, the ivory trimmed necklaces I do sell for upwards of $1,000 because the time, the energy, and the materials used are very costly just to get started with that. And so a lot of misconceptions about fashion and like haute couture is it's pretty inaccessible. And so we're just gonna go over some terms that like people might not be familiar with. So when someone says like something's bespoke or a custom, all bespoke means is you've either seen a tailor at least 3 times or you've had at least 3 alterations. So hemming your pants, the hem, that's 1 alteration. You take in the waist, that's 2, or you unhem it, that's 3. Now you own a bespoke pair of pants. And so now they're bespoke, they're luxury, they're a haute couture item because you've seen a tailor 3 times. And part of now in the fashion world, you can use bespoke to say you literally got your measurements taken, and now it's a bespoke luxury item with the price tag starting at 10,000 or more because you had it tailored to you. So we'll go over some item comparisons about not so much bashing high fashion, but people don't understand there's a lot more accessible, high quality items all around them. You don't have to focus on buying from Dior, Versace, saving up for Valentino or like Gucci. There's beautiful, accessible artwork that's ready for you, that's just as good quality for less of the price and way more accessible. So you'll see on the picture, the model in the red is wearing a 1996 Christian Dior Masai necklace that was made for the show. So that retails about $9,000, and it was just made with regular glass beads, but it was not made by. So the name comes from the Maasai tribe in Africa that wears these necklaces daily, but the fashion show did have to make a disclaimer saying that there was not an African beater on the team, so it's just made by whoever is employed by the fashion house to do embroidery made that, and they still have the audacity to charge $9,000 for it. And of course, it's archival, so the price only goes up from there. And then on the other side, the picture in blue is the large ivory necklace. It's the one I'm most proud of. It's the one that I donated, and it has ivory pearls on it. It has glass beads, and for hardware, for things like this, like the lobster clasp or the clasp to tie off the necklace, I normally use 24 karat gold because that way it's guaranteed that it won't rust. Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
What's the dimension of that necklace? Is it similar?
Yeah, so the necklaces that I wear, they are the Inuit style traditional wear, so they go from shoulder to shoulder. Yeah, and then the full ones, the design continues on the back, but because this was already so heavy, I only did this one shoulder to shoulder, so it wouldn't fall off. And it also came with a pair of matching earrings, because another issue I guess people would say, I'd love to buy the necklace, but I don't know what I'd wear with them, so I would sell the necklace to go with it, as well as it in a traveling case. And like I said, so you can buy the ivory with the gold, with the imported check beads in a traveling case with the matching earrings, and it's only $1,000. Versus you could buy the mass-produced Maasai tribe inspired necklace that probably is just made with stainless steel clasps and things for over $9,000. And a lot of people don't realize that they have all this art right in their own neighborhoods, in their own cities, at their markets, and they just don't think about it because they're like, well, if it's a native item, I don't want to buy it because I can't wear it. But if it's for sale, you can wear it. That's what every artist I've ever talked to says. So here's another comparison. So that's the famous Lady D handbag from Dior, designed for Princess Diana. And so this is the mini version that features, this was huge when it came out like last year because it's one of the first Dior bags that has beadwork on it. That's what they call the beadwork, is those little bumps on there. So the regular retail price for that starts at $6,000 for the handbag, and it's a mini bag, so it's also only 6 inches wide, and it does feature real animal products. So it is made with lambskin, which is a rarity in the fashion world now, since a lot of people have moved on to other forms of alternative leather. And then on the other side is an original design that actually won the best in show at the Heard Museum for the art market they had there by the beater Elias Jade Not Afraid, who's also made many earrings and helped decorate dresses for Lily Gladstone for the Oscars, for Cannes, and for other photo shoots and opportunities. He actually made the large Deliria shell earrings that she wore in the cover for like a Vogue shoot, and then she also wore ermine tail earrings from him too for a meeting at the Cannes Film Festival. And so this piece is obviously a specialty because it's the best in show and it's a museum quality piece. The museum actually acquired it after he won best in show, because they couldn't let it was for sale, like, so they were like, oh, we absolutely cannot let this walk out the door. It needs to be in our museum. So the Lady Dior bag starts at $6,000. The original design by Elias Jade, I've seen estimates for it. The price was not disclosed online, but I have seen estimates starting at between 6,000 and up, because it is such a specialty handbag. But I have seen other handbags at markets where they're made with tanned moose leather from the region, and then beadwork, and then even the octopus bags, you can get them for $150, $300, depending on how large or how intricate the beadwork is. And you know that Not only are the beads meant to stay on for life, they're made with real moose leather, and that means they're durable in case you get it wet. You don't have to worry about keeping it clean, and it will last a lifetime compared to other bags, which leads us into the accessibility part, which is the part that most people seem to forget, that you can find Alaska Native and Native American art anywhere because we are in America. So one of the issues with buying like the high fashion brands and the haute couture is you have to do the sales consultants and sale consults, where you can't even buy the bag or buy the item unless you do a consultation or you're already a member. The biggest example is like the buy-in program with the Birkin bag. So the Birkin bag is the world famous bag designed for Jane Birkin by Hermes, and all it is a horse leather tote bag, and you cannot buy a Birkin unless you are offered one. If I wanted to go to Hermes down in New York City and I walked in and said, "Can I have one Birkin bag, please?" They would say no, because I haven't spent enough money with Hermes yet to be able to afford a bag with them. So you have to do at least a $10,000 buy-in, and then you have to be able to afford the bag, which starts at $10,000 to $20,000. Which again, instead of using the bag that's $10,000 or $20,000 that's made with leather alternatives, I can go to the market. Literally, there's the markets here in Sitka where they have local artists, and I could buy a moose leather bag for a fraction of that price, and I will be able to use it for my entire life. Some good resources. I get a lot of people asking me, how do I know when there's a market? Where do I go? How do I find them? And the first resource is Facebook. A lot of people don't realize that all these events are always really accessible, and the tribes who put on their own markets or their individual markets, they make flyers. So if you just go on Facebook and you search like Native American or Alaska Native markets near me, you will come up with a bunch of whole list of ones going on, local ones, like weekend ones, pop-up ones that will have resources, and they'll be sponsored by the tribes. And then if you want a broader one, so a good resource is the American Indian and Alaska Native Tourism Association. They're based down in Albuquerque, and so their whole thing is making arts and things more accessible, and they have a big list. They have a page on their website that just says markets near me, and you just type in the name of your city and it tells you what markets are going on nearby. And for some of the ones that are bigger, they'll even tell you what vendors are going to be there. So if you want to follow, if you would like to buy like Elias J. Not Afraid bag, you could even search his name up and see if he's at a market nearby you. Yeah, and then another good website, it's a little more difficult to use, but using the BIA website. So on the Board of Indian Affairs website, they actually do have an entire section dedicated to not just the Board of Indian Arts and Crafts, but they also have official markets and events happening. So these would be events that are sponsored by the BIA. So one of them happens in Washington, DC at the Smithsonian for the Museum of the Indigenous Peoples. And they get together, like they do an all call, and they get like the 200 to 300 best Native artists in the entire country and bring them all together. And they host like fashion shows, they have museum quality pieces, and they also just do a regular market. So you can get your $25 pair of earrings or your $10,000 parka all in the same place for that market. And that's a pretty good source to use. Yeah, and so like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's nice about buying Alaska Native and Native American things is we kind of have our own quality control, even though everyone's an individual artist. Part of the things that protects our art from being stolen by like Amazon or like drop shippers is called the Indian Art and Crafts Board. And so this is a federal law that protects all art made by Native American people and Alaska Native people to certify that, yes, I made this by a traditional means. I also made it to a high enough quality that it could be traditional wear. And it also ensures that any products used were gathered sustainably and were gathered legally. So especially in Alaska, because we have so many highly regulated items that are used in regalia, we have another board, that's the Alaska State Council on the Arts, with the Silver Hand program, and that's a program I'm very passionate about. So that dictates that if you make something out of ivory or beaver or a seal skin or a sea otter, so a controlled like marine mammal, that you bought the fur, you bought the ivory, someone else who was Alaska Native, and you certified along the whole way that everything was bought legally and bought and used sustainably, and the materials you used were used all the way through to the best of their abilities. And it also ensures that like the quality of items I'm selling are going to be close to museum quality because you put so much time and effort into it. So yeah, so all of it, this whole presentation is just kind of an intro to beadwork and helping people understand that there's a lot of accessible high fashion items. You just have to be able to go to the weekend market sometimes, because sometimes your dream bag might not be one of these haute couture items, or your earrings might not be like the $2.99 special on Amazon. Instead, it's going to be people who are, their whole livelihood is making earrings, making bags, making shoes, making clothing, because a lot of designers even make their own cloth too. A lot of people do fiber arts, so weave like for cotton and weave rugs and all of that. So it helps. So it also is more sustainable in the end to buy local anyways, but it also keeps this tradition alive, because if people don't buy anything, we don't have any reason to make anything. Questions?
Yeah, so currently,
Mhm.
I have a piece of beadwork that, my nephew, sent to me, and it was from, we were saying about the side. It was a neck,
The big collar.
a big collar.
Yeah.
And it was made with wire.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So definitely wire is used for those necklaces that are much heavier.
Yeah,
And the ones that are much larger, you're definitely going to want to have the wire on that one. Also, I think it has to do with the climate too, because I know if it's warm out and hot, you don't want the string to snap, them
Yeah.
sweating and getting wet and deteriorating over time.
yeah.
And because also in ancient Egypt too, they would use a lot of metal, like they would fuse their beads to like metal plates. So that way, it lasts longer, especially with it being humid and hot out, because it won't deteriorate the same way string does. Yeah, and then for a lot of my necklaces too, and a lot of Inuit artists, they actually use the sinew for beadwork. So that way, if you sweat in it, because it's the same thing you use to make parkas and mukluks and everything, it's very resistant to like human sweat or extreme climate change. And also because it's a much heavier thread, even though it's really thin, it lasts longer, so you're less likely to have to make repairs on your beadwork. So all the people you see who do like the Athabascan style, where they bead directly onto the moose hides and things, they're going to be using sinew to ensure that it doesn't come off.
So sinew, can
Yeah.
you speak to, is that
Yeah.
an animal product?
Yeah, so this is an animal product. So it's actually the dried tendon of like the caribou or the reindeer leg. And sometimes you could use like the back strap on them too, but almost all the time, it's going to be that tendon that's dried out. And so traditionally what they would have is, you dry it and you have it like in a long strip, and then you go through and you cut it, and then you twist them together. So this little piece of thread is actually 4 threads put together. So if I were to sew with this, it's too big, believe it or not, for my project. So I would actually split the thread into the smaller 4 pieces and use 1 or 2 at a time, because you don't really need a lot of it because it's so strong.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have such a big piece. And thankfully with modern technology, it's a lot more mechanized, so it can be this fine. But in museum pieces and artifact pieces, you'll see like the sinew would be a little bigger because it's all done by hand. Yeah.
So, and at the beginning of your presentation, when you were
Yeah.
having, the initial development of beading.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing the shells and I'm wondering,
Yeah.
how did they get the holes in there? Is it tapping or is
Uh,
it drilling?
It depends on the region, but a lot of it's a drill. So here in Alaska, what you'll see old pictures of ivory carvers, it's a mouth drill, they call it. So it looks like a bow, and you have a piece where the arrow would be, and you hold it in your mouth because you need both of your arms to go back and forth, and it works just like a manual drill. And so you have to find like I know there's different rocks you could use, and some of them are other like metal tips too, and just yeah, but a lot of them are like rock tips, and that's how you make it. So depending on how big or small you want the hole, you would pick your tip, and then you would just like retie it around with the sinew or whatever fasteners you have for it, and then just work on it like that. But there's like things where you can carefully like I know like kind of tapping and drilling too, and sometimes holes naturally occur too, like if for like a lot of the shells you see are because you find them on the beach and there's a hole in the back of them. And then same thing with rocks, especially like on the West Coast here in America, you'll see that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
I have two questions. Could you describe for the people on Zoom and also here, how much thread you actually end up using to create a necklace like the one you have on show people?
Yeah, so the necklace I'm wearing right now is what I would call a medium size for the ones I make because it has 2 layers of the bugles. And so the thing that makes this style unique, which is something that the Inuit people also do, is you don't use a loom, because when you use a loom for beading, it makes the beads stiffer and it makes it hard to make complex patterns. So I use a single thread to go through up and down. So I was in the process of starting one right now, as we can kind of see here. So this is the beginning of a simple necklace because there's only 1 layer with the bugles. So for this medium necklace that I would say probably took me 15 to 20 hours to make, there's 12 to 15 feet of thread in here. And it's the high quality beading thread that's closer to fishing line, because I try to use thread that can hold a heavy weight so that way it doesn't fall as I use it. And then for the much larger ones, like that blue one, it would have been closer to 15 to 18 feet, and then I've made even a larger, more complicated one with all beads, and that one took probably closer to 18 to 20 feet of thread because it was about 6 or 7 inches wide down, and then it was a triple layer of beads. Yeah, and so that's very common, and you'll see even more thread usage because for elders who are Inuit, one of their items they wear for their regalia is actually necklaces that are elbow length. So and they're elbow length all the way around like a cape. So I can't imagine how much thread goes into there, because if I'm using 12 to 15 feet for this necklace, I can't imagine how much an elbow length necklace would take.
And then I've got one more question before we turn it over to see if anyone on the Zoom has a question. Can you talk about what your greatest challenge is as an artist who's creating? You're creating, but you also have the task of trying to market your goods and sell your goods.
A issue that I have is a lot of people, the reason why I pulled up those Google searches to show you is a lot of people are actually, they just want to look at my art. They don't want to buy it because they're worried since they're not indigenous, they can't wear it. And that's why I kept mentioning throughout the presentation, if it's for sale and it's on the table, it's for anybody. I wouldn't be selling, as for me personally, as a business owner, if there was something like special, like if I were to make parkas or mucklucks, for me, that's still special. So I wouldn't sell it openly. I would either gift them to people or do them on a commission basis. I wouldn't just have it out. Also, that takes a lot of work, but if it's on the table, it's for sale, because that's the biggest issue I get, because every time I do a market, I have like 5 to 10 people just, oh, I wish I could buy that, but you know, I'm not native. And I'm like, it's $20. You want it? Like it's for sale. Like for the earrings, especially, because I'm like, they're just earrings. They just happen to have a traditional design, but they're $20 if you want them. So that's a big challenge I have. And then the other big issue I have is the pricing things correctly, because a lot of people assume because it is Alaska Native made that it's gonna be cheap and they think they can get one over on you. And I was like, first of all, I use 24 karat gold, so you gotta pay for that because you want this piece to last, because all artists make things to last a lifetime, because that's how we are traditionally. Because if you're going to do something, you might as well make it good, and you better make it last. So everyone who's selling things, they're meant to last a lifetime and not need repair. So it's already the durability, and then the materials used are going to be a much higher quality than what you would find at other places. Because I've gone to some markets where people have like, you know, cheaper earrings, and people are like, oh, well, I was going to buy from you, but this person had a sale for their earrings. And I was like, that's cool. Well, you don't have to tell me that. And I was like, cool, let me know when they fall apart, because I'll be here still. Yeah, because I make sure to invest in my materials so that way the final product looks good. And that's a very common thing all over Alaska and in the lower 48 too, is to invest in your materials, because we take pride in what we sell. And that's one of the big, we take pride in what we sell. Yeah.
And one more question
Yeah.
to the audience for questions. when you work with ivory beads,
Mhm.
do you want to talk about and share how you
Yeah.
make ivory beads?
Yeah, so so here, I will show this for the camera too. So these are vintage ivory beads. I got them from uh, like a resale store down in Anchorage, up in Anchorage, and they were a little cheaper than other ivory beads because the design of the bead is not the contemporary perfect sphere. It's more of like a little like watermelon shape, I would say, which was popular in like the 60s to the 80s. And the thing is, when you buy ivory, ivory is a highly regulated good in America. Only people who are at least 1/4 Alaska Native can even purchase or handle raw ivory. And so they do that by when you go beach combing, sometimes you'll find like the walrus head wash up on shore, and then you could take the ivory from there. But when you do find like the raw ivory, it is tagged, and all the ivory tusks that are found all over like Alaska, they're all stored in a database with the BIA. So they know how many ivory tusks are being found and in what areas, and because it's also a federal crime and you can go to jail for 7 to 10 years and face a fine, and then also be banned from hunting if you are found head hunting, which is the practice of hunting walruses just for their ivory, much like poaching in Africa for elephant ivory is highly illegal, as well as sawing off the ivory because it's extremely painful and it leaves the animal very vulnerable because it's their teeth. We wouldn't like it if someone took the bottom part of our teeth off. So when I buy ivory, there's sellers who I buy through them that I personally know because of my family friends, and also it's a skill that's been passed down through their generation. So it's like I buy from this person because they learned from their dad, who learned from their dad, who was like a traditional like carver, and this is how they all learn. And they also all have that silver hand tag that verifies that they are Alaska Native. Because to qualify for the silver hand permit, you have to be 1/4 Alaskan Native, I believe, and then you have to be able to trace your lineage back 5 generations to an indigenous person in Alaska, like 5 direct links. Like you can't be like, well, I'm not sure about my great grandma, but I know for sure my no, it has to be confirmed with records in the BIA. And so a lot of the times people who sell ivory and sea mammal materials that are protected, like the sea otter here that I'm working on, they will have that permit. Yeah, I could also like tag my beadwork as that, but because I'm just using glass beads, I don't often put a tag on every single item. But when I did sell like the ivory, the necklace with the ivory pearls along the bottom, I made sure to include that tag. So that way the fundraiser and the ultimate buyer knew that I had obtained all the ivory legally.
So to be able to have that,
Mhm.
a tag,
Mhm.
the little silver tag with
Yeah.
the hand,
Yeah.
do you have to go through the legal work ahead of time and then you
Yeah.
justify your lineage?
Kind of, yeah. So it's a part of the BIA. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs already has records on everybody because you have to be, in order to receive services like healthcare or scholarships, you're enrolled. And so for Alaska, because we have the extra promise of the ivory and the sea mammal, we have our own, it varies from state to state and tribe to tribe, but Alaska made sure to have another layer of protection between people who poach and people who harvest legally.
Mhm.
So I went to the State Council on the Arts, and they have a person who works for the State Council on the Arts and the BIA. And I submitted an application. I said, here's my name, here's my full name, here's my date of birth, here's my tribal enrollment card, here's my mom's name, and here's like my grandparents' name. And they went through the system and they started matching like here, like they're like, okay, Lisa Lynch is related to her mom, whose mom is, my mom. So I'm half Inupiaq, my mom is full Inupiaq. They're like, okay, so there's one, and then my grandparents, my great grandparents, my great great grandparents, and it's all through the BIA because they already have records as early as like the first census after Alaska was about like in the 1870s.
Mhm.
They have census records that early.
Mhm.
So that's how they trace it, yeah. And if you're not enrolled, it's a little more difficult process because you might as well file for enrollment at that point. If you're gonna do all the paper for an art permit, you might as well just file for enrollment, which is a very lengthy process.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
And I just wanted to say, sometimes those requirements about working, who can work with sea otter pelts, for example,
Mhm.
those can be onerous or problematic for some people. I've heard stories of local youngsters wanting to take
Yeah.
sewing classes, but they can't participate because they don't have enough blood quantum, even though they're indigenous, they don't have enough
Yeah, to
according
hand,
to the federal government to be able to participate in the practice. So
Yeah.
it is,
it
a
has,
double-edged sword in this.
yeah, because on one hand, it's keeping the animals safe, but on the other hand, it's excluding people. Because there's not a lot of us left, so we should at least be able to teach the people who are left, yeah.
And then do we have any questions from the Zoom audience?
Yeah.
Everyone's been so quiet. If you'd like to raise your hand or unmute yourself or type.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, any hands raised at the moment? Okay. Oh. Yes.
So I'm thinking now, when you said earlier about the loom, because I'm imagining,
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at your work and I am not a bead person, so I don't know.
Yeah.
This may be naive, but you're saying, so that kind of a piece is made on a loom?
Yeah, some people do loom work, so especially like to make the chokers. Some people do that if they have like a larger design, or like what's really popular now, it's like if you want to spell something out, or like earrings on a loom too, you could do that. But I don't do a loom because you have to have a less complicated pattern. So to do the designs I want to do and to have the varying lengths, because it's like when I do my necklace layers, not everything is the exact same measurement for every layer I do. So for like the necklace that has 4 layers here, all 4 layers are a different length, and that'd just be horrible to do on a loom, because then I have to set every single thread to like be different. So it's just easier for me for what I do to do the long single thread. Like it looks ridiculous, especially when I'm starting, because I'll have like the 8 feet going like this and I'll be pulling and pulling.
So let me ask then,
Yeah.
it's got 4 different levels.
Yeah.
Do you make each level and then? sew them
No,
together,
so
or it's just
one long continuous going up and down. Yeah, so up and down and up and down, up and down. Yeah. And so the only good thing is also when you travel, because they're so flexible, because they were all made in single thread, they're really easy to travel with, because like this necklace rolls up to only be this big. Because it's so flexible because of the single thread and the type of thread I use. And same thing with that large ivory necklace, it rolled up to be like this big too. This big around them, shoulder to shoulder, but rolls up to that big. Yeah.
So when did you first start beading?
I started beading a few years ago, and it was pretty easy for me because when I was growing up, I liked to do embroidery. So I already was very acquainted with like needle art like that. So yeah, like not needle tatting, but definitely embroidery on like clothing and on like doing embroidery projects and things like that. So it's something that really interests me.
Yeah.
That, and I don't know, I can't figure out knitting and I can't figure out crocheting. So I thought, okay, beading has to be easier than those. Yeah, and then I find it fun because it gives me something to do, like when I'm listening to like lectures, or if I'm watching a TV show, I'll just, yeah, because I like to be busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? And then I don't see any on the Zoom, so any questions online or?
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Lisa. And Lisa is giving a talk next week. Again, at the same day and time. It'll be a talk on reindeer herding in Alaska and her personal family's connection to reindeer herding. And then finally, she'll give her last talk on June 27th. That will be a talk on a selection of artifacts and cultural belongings of the Sheldon Jackson Museum. All the talks will be recorded on Zoom, and you can attend virtually or you can come in person. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody.
So you'll be here next Friday.
Yep.
At this time.
Yep, and
Awesome.
we'll do reindeer herding and my family's connection to it. Oh, you're welcome, people online. Yeah, because my family are reindeer herders.